next week. Today we're going to be covering how the 12 rules kind of fit into Shrikant's little map and own flow that he's going to be presenting. But first, let's kind of go over some of the rules real quick. The first one is stand up straight with your shoulders back. This one's about being able to confront the challenge of life and take it on forthrightly and with courage. From Peterson's standpoint, it kind of reflects the hero's myth and the idea of like us as primates have kind of evolved to take on the main strategy that whenever anything new comes up, anything new and challenging comes up, your best strategy, so by no means one that guarantees success, simply the best one you got, is to take whatever it is that is new, scary, or challenging head on forthrightly and with courage. So the idea is that, you know, no matter what, you should always be able to take on the load that life gives you and try to bear it as much as you can. And he also goes into some of his lectures about that being represented in the Jesus Christ story by bearing the cross. Do you have any comments for one, or did you want to say anything for two?
Yeah, and so I think one thing for one, and an important thing about this entire book is it's weaving through a lot of different disciplines. And chapter one is one that really sets us up in a lot of evolutionary biology. That's kind of the status. So we get a lot of story here, and we get a lot of kind of story. So that moves us into rule 2, treat yourself like you're someone you're responsible for helping. And in this chapter, Peterson is going to start to set up our own ego and kind of our own personality as being twofold, and encourage us to start to have a conversation with ourselves and see ourselves in the third person and start to lift that up. The classic story here is about how humans are so bad at medical adherence to the prescriptions we're prescribed, but we're so easy to take care of a pet and prescribe those prescriptions. Why is it that we're so willing to take care of others and take care of our friends and take on other people's burdens, but so unwilling to do that for ourselves? And in this chapter, he's really hoping to kind of realign us on that path. I'm going to just share my screen and pull up all these while we talk through them.
Oh yeah, that actually works great. Go ahead. And for the third one, it's make friends with people who want the best for you. In this one, he kind of also explains that is one, to start with, that is the main function of psychology. That is how therapy tends to normally work. You are trying to elicit, you're trying to serve as a therapist, as the person that wants the best for the other person. This is Peterson's approach to therapy. Very different from, for example, Carl Rogers' approach to therapy, which is pure positive regard. Peterson says maybe that you want to add a little bit of nuance, a little bit of a caveat there, where it's like, yes, I'm not going to just abandon you because you're also a flawed person, but at the same time, I do want the best for the part of you that wants the best for you. I'm not interested in helping the part that's self-destructive, the part that hates people or life. And Peterson then extends that to kind of making the statement that you should also work to perceive that for yourself, to be able to see yourself as someone who deserves to be treated with the best. And more importantly, that your social groups are going to also define that. The people you're around and the friends you make kind of define how you also perceive yourself and what gets shaped. And good friends won't allow you to ruin your own life, essentially. And they kind of serve as guardrails for any bad decisions they do make. He also makes points about how socialization has a really massive impact in our psychology. And even people who are hyper aggressive or who may have some antisocial behaviors when they're young, as long as they have friends, the friends themselves kind of socialize them as they grow older.
There's a proximity element here too. So just, that which you surround yourself with, there's, there's a really heavy sort of self-help element to these two chapters, 2 and 3. So put yourself on a trajectory toward you're aiming somewhere, and then surround yourself with the people that are going to lift you up in those interactions as opposed to bringing you down.
And then for, which one are we on? 5?
Yeah, so we're number 4. Compare yourself to
4.
Yesterday, not with who someone else is today. So this is one again where he's starting to kind of bring in this union concept of who is the full self. What are the elements of that? Where are we aiming versus kind of what is the shadow, and putting yourself on your own hero's journey, your own individual trajectory versus the trajectory of everyone else. So why is that a flawed model to kind of compare us to each other? Well, first of all, we don't know what's going on in someone's backstory. We don't know what's under the hood. Everyone, especially as we get into adulthood, has had such a unique mix of experiences that it's really just illogical to start to see that through their own lens. And there's a big logos element here, Roger, that I'll let you talk about if you want.
Yeah, so the idea here is essentially that you're, as Claire was saying, like to compare yourself to anyone else is kind of a fool's errand, because one, more than likely, you're only comparing one dimension, right? You can't compare anyone's entire life to anyone's entire life. There's just too much information. So then you have to kind of choose one dimension that you value at that time. And almost always, Peterson points out, it's like that self-critic version of you, the one that wants to compare to other people, is almost always negative. And it's almost always going to pick a side of you that's already weak, that's already not, that you already know isn't that strong. And then it's going to find someone who's amazing at it and say, yeah, see, you're not that. And Peterson, one, points out that's like, look, the purpose of that is that it's when he points out that, like, the Cain and Abel thing, that once someone starts to live their life in a admirable way, there's 2 ways you can interact with that. You can see that as admirable and say, oh, that's what I want to become. But there's also the resentment aspect of this is what you could be if you only tried, and you're not that. So that makes us feel bad. But Peterson also has some of the sympathy of saying, look, you can't, like, though that's helpful motivation wise, realistically, that's not actually a very good comparison. You're not like them at all. Everyone's life is completely different and almost completely incomparable. It's like, so, well, okay, we have a problem. You want to improve and you need to improve, but you have no way to make a comparison. So Peterson makes the point. It's like, well, you do have someone, you through time, right? Like, and that's a way better comparison, because you're pretty much the same as you were yesterday. Almost everything's exactly the same. So therefore, any improvement can actually be measured. So if you're better today than you were yesterday, that's demonstrably good by your own measurement, right? Like, you're actually improving, and it's a good comparison that can actually propel you towards something.
That's awesome. Do you think I know, because we're heading kind of toward a summary here, when you look at these first 4, even into the 5 chapters of the book, Roger, do you see these as grouped in any way? I mean, there's a lot of kind of imperatives. It's a self-help focused, it's very individual aligned, but do you think of these together?
So yeah, on almost all of these, I see Peterson kind of being a therapist, right? Like, you see him, you can see all of these from like a therapy perspective also, just helping people in general. So like, stand up straight with the shoulders back. He also talks about assertion training. And, a lot of people tend, especially really agreeable people, tend to just not be able to voice themselves and their opinion very strongly. So, that idea of like, no, like, stand up straight, take it on. It's going to be hard, especially if you're agreeable. Conflict is extremely hard and extremely uncomfortable for some people. So it's like, I can see that he's obviously done this and taught this to a lot of others. For the second one of like, treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. I think that's a pretty obvious one for many people that are depressed. A lot of times depressed people tend to not see the value in their own life or in themselves. They almost always perceive themselves as a burden. And that perception is so deeply rooted from the illness that like it seems as though that is actually more like the most truthful statement they can muster, right? It's like, I'm a burden and I shouldn't be alive. And like that's a like, so I can see Peterson kind of dealing with all the check marks of like common pathologies, and it's like make friends
them sort of in order of importance, or like in simplest terms, and then going backwards, and then of course at the end we get some heavy hitters again, but
right. Well, I think it's like very specific to like more general. It's like very specific to like certain issues. Like if you struggle with assertiveness, here's this. If you struggle with just general lack of self-confidence or, you know, depression, that's here. And then I know Peterson studied a lot of addiction, and he often comments how much addiction is influenced by the people you hang out with. And if you are addicted, one of the hardest things to do is, you know, to come off it is like, it's like you can go through rehab and then they'll be off the drug. That's not the problem. The problem is once they get out of rehab, what life are they supposed to return to that isn't exactly the life they left, right? All their friend networks, all the places they hang out, everything they know how to do. So like you're basically taking someone out of their environment, cleaning them up, and then dropping them right back to the environment that made that like at least aided in them becoming what led to them having to go to rehab in the first place. And then the comparison one is always for the perfectionists that are just constantly trying to, or the people, either perfectionists or resentful people, right? Like the inability to be able to say, it's like, all right, look, there's always going to be people that are better looking than me. There's always going to be people that's going to have whatever it is that I would like. There's going to be other groups that have it. There's always someone better than you in almost every dimension, right? Unless you're someone who truly strives to be better in one dimension. Those are your pro athletes, those are your, you know, artists and all that. But then there's also a cost to pay for that. You know, you sacrifice the rest of your life of everything else just to specialize in one very particular thing. And then from here he starts to kind of get more and more generalized now. So it's like, right, don't let your kids do anything that will make you dislike them. It's just like general parent advice is like your main job as a parent should be to socialize your kids well enough so that they can basically be socialized by the community they're brought up in. Because if you don't prepare your kids for that, then the obvious is going to happen. No one's going to like your kids. They're going to be isolated. As they're isolated from 5 until, you know, essentially the rest of their life, if they don't learn it, they're just going to struggle, and they're not even going to understand why they're struggling. And Peterson kind of says that it's a really harsh and he's like mean thing to do, but it's a necessary thing to do. And he often notes of the Freudian idea of the failure of the mother, the idea that in order for a mother to succeed, she has to become a mean mother. And what he means by that is, whenever, for example, weaning a child, right, after you've breastfed a child, it's like stopping that. And, you know, even though the child's crying and wants it, being like, nope, not happening. And making the child quite literally suffer in to some extent for the betterment of that child, and slowly pushing them away and preparing them for the world rather than just investing in protecting them, which is the Freudian risk of the devouring mother, or the mother that overprotects their children in that temptation.
Sorry, Claire, we only got through 5, of course. You told
okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'll go ahead and do the rest. These are you went only through 5?
Yeah, we got into it. I'm sorry. It's a lot. It's detailed.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Why don't we can do it in one sentence each, because we're halfway through.
Please. Yes, please.
Quickly.
Yes, please.
Okay, so next one, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. This is where we bring in the kind of Columbine examples and really getting us to orient towards our own trajectory of growth. What is one little thing you can improve today? Start by cleaning your room, and then expand that trajectory from there. So start with the little thing and kind of grow as you can.
Right. And then from there, he kind of, so the 6 is like nihilistic loss of purpose. And then the 7th is like, all right, well, how do you solve that? Which is his solution then is like to pursue what is meaningful. And he brings in a lot of his own theory in this, but essentially the idea is to pursue the things that are most engaging and that are aimed towards something that you yourself judge as truly good after you've addressed your own issues, which then leads to is like, well, how are you supposed to know that something's truly like, how are you supposed to adjust your address your own issues and aim to something that's good? It's like, well, you can start by telling the truth. The truth and honesty seems to be one of the few things that most of us agree is a pretty universally valued thing. Honesty and truth seems to kind of help everyone, and it's desired by everyone. And then 9, assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. He points this out again because engaging with conversations can be very helpful. And again, similar to the truth thing, is a way of attaining information that you may not have access to. And in doing that, for Peterson, we're essentially beings that are meant to detect patterns and feel most fulfilled when we're actually consuming information that helps us understand the world and helps us orient ourselves towards the goals that we've decided are valuable. And then that's as far as we've gotten so far. But we can, Shrikant, would you like us to go to the ones we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, just a couple of sentences each so that we get,
right.
we complete the mapping.
All right, so for being precise in your speech, in this general one we'll be covering next week, he kind of goes into the main idea of how important it is that the words that you speak actually mean what you're attempting to say, and that we need to be quite careful in that, because when we don't do that, we don't quite understand just how strong and powerful our words actually change the world around us. A lot of times they can have much deeper influences than any of us would think. So therefore, being able to be quite clear and precise also helps with the ability to conceptualize and speak the truth much better. And then finally, the last two kind of go, here's a little bit, this one's a little bit more of a political statement, but it's one that I think is right to say. Don't bother children when they are skateboarding. This is a general idea of that risk taking is extremely valuable for children, similar to the mother becoming, a little bit of a mean mother when she starts to slowly push the child away so that it becomes independent. Children are constantly trying to explore their own limitations. They're trying to learn what bravery is, and they're trying to learn, what is it my body can do? What is it my body can't do? What do all these authority figures around me allow? What don't they allow? What happens if I break these rules, right? Like, it's a complete and total exploration. And to just immediately dampen that, Peterson's kind of saying, it's like, well, at that point, you immediately shut down all purpose of exploration, right? Like, it's like, if they feel like they can't move at all, like it's gonna twist them into different pathological, it's going to cause a lot of different pathological issues if you just constantly are telling them from the start that they are patriarchal, oppressive, and that boys who are attempting to even just assert themselves or push their aggression are just by nature bad, when really that's just more of their exploration of the limits. And then finally, the last one is pet a cat when you encounter one in the street. This chapter has a lot more to do with just how it is, even if you follow all these things and you are going through a meaningful path and you are having, you're doing everything that you could and best as you could, how are you supposed to deal with the inevitable tragedy that you still have to face no matter what, because it's the price of existence. And Peterson kind of talks about changing your time scale, being able to process information instead of in the scope of a lifetime or in the scope of years. If it's really bad, bring it to months, days, weeks, or even hours or minutes, right? If it's so bad that all you can do is focus on getting over the next minute, that's what you do, right? And you conceptualize your world like that. And he points out that people are extremely tough and are capable of handling the most horrible things anyone could imagine using these strategies. And always remembering to value the beautiful miracles that happen in front of you, such as when a cat that lets you actually pet it. And that's a quick summary of all of them.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Roger. Claire, can you stop sharing? All right, folks. So firstly, sorry about this. We are moving our office and there's all kinds of lease issues that I had to deal with. So sorry about the delay. But what I want to do today is to look at these 12 rules as a system, because it is a system. See, the thing about 12 rules, thing about Jordan Peterson is that he's a very authentic person. So these are actually his rules of operation, and he has picked them very carefully. The second thing is that his mind is very broad. He uses this approach called consilience. So he picks up principles from multiple areas, whether it is evolutionary biology or mythology or science or history, so he just picks up principles from everywhere and brings them together. Now he has presented it as 12 rules. So I was trying to organize them. I've always wanted to organize them so that I can use them better. I can't use them as 12 rules. I like to see how they are connected together. So that's kind of, coming kind of bottom up of saying, okay, how do we organize these things so that they kind of fit together and we can use them as a system? The second thing is that I've been trying to figure out human beings for a long time. And in our meetups, we've been talking about human beings for a long time. And what I have found is that developing a common vocabulary is a huge deal, because what it does is that it enables you to talk at deeper and deeper levels. I can give you two examples. One was when we started studying Jordan Peterson himself, his entire thought. So ideas like order and chaos, the concept of meaning, all of these things kind of provided a common vocabulary. So whenever we dealt with any topic, we had that as a common base. So we could go deeper, much faster in conversation. The same thing happened when we looked at Daniel Kahneman's ideas of system 1 and system 2. And I've been trying to say, okay, can we do more? Can we kind of come up with a system where we can at least come up with a vocabulary of talking about the human condition, human experience that covers large part of it in one simple thing? And that's what I've been working on. So this is inspired by partly Daniel Kahneman, partly Carl Jung. So let me show you the diagram here. And then I'm going to show you how I was able to organize the 12 rules based on this. So I'm going to share content, share screen, start broadcast. Okay. Okay. And okay, so here's the diagram. One of the biggest things, so this is like summary of everything I've learned about human beings in one place. The primary axis here is the horizontal axis. We are biological beings. We have evolved over a long time, millions of years, and we have a certain nature as a result of that. We are mammals. We live in families. A group of maybe 30 people, 50 people, something like that, of close-knit families, extended families, you can call it a tribe. That's where we evolved. And then we have got these large brains where we are able to take in large patterns and have a very complex repertoire of habits and actions to respond to things. So if you want to look at it, so this entire part over here is our evolutionary heritage. This part, so that's our evolutionary heritage. Fast forward, with the development of cities, we moved from living in groups of about 30 people whom we know very well, whom we can relate to. Our brains, our abilities are very, very good in dealing with people whom we know very well, and a small number of people that you're face to face with. A lot of the communication is happening with body language, with tone of the voice. Very little conceptual communication is actually needed to keep this going. So we have family over here, and here we've got what Daniel Kahneman calls System 1. So this is our evolutionary heritage. This is very, very powerful. With this group of people working together with these large brains, we were the top predator, very successful species. And that is all on the left-hand side. That's the biological side. The top part is the internal part, and the bottom part is the external part. So this is the external part of the family, and this is the internal part of System 1, or being able to see patterns. That's our emotional mechanism, which is automatic, very fast. It is intuitive. So there are different ways of describing it. Now, fast forward to cities. I think this is mostly based on works of anthropologists, like people like Julian Jaynes and others. There is a big division when you move from a group of about 30, 40 people to a city of 5,000 people, because suddenly there are people whom you do not know. And a whole bunch of tools came into being at the same time, a whole bunch of innovations. There is agriculture, there is cities, there is government, there is religion, there is writing. All of it is about the same time in various places in the world. What that does is that it develops your internal ability of deliberation. With writing, you develop a way of being more self-aware, being aware of what you're thinking about. You're able to systematically, instead of this system is reactive, this is proactive, this is willful, deliberate, systematic way of exploring the world. So that's internally, that's what is happening. And what that makes possible is the city, or civilization, or ability to deal with people that you do not know, making possible unlimited, virtually unlimited scale of cooperation, working together and producing a large economy that is responsible for all the abundance and the leisure that we are enjoying by being able to talk about such things. So this entire part is kind of the civilization part. I'm calling it of the city, metropolitan for now. I'm not happy with the name. Maybe I will come up with a better name, but this is the modern part. This is only 5,000 years old. This part is millions of years old. This is about 5,000 years old. So that's the rough division. That's the horizontal and vertical axis, the horizontal axis. The vertical axis is inspired by people like Brunowski, who observe that human beings are very odd creatures. We are social solitary. We are social in a fundamental way, and we are solitary in a fundamental way. When we are thinking, we're alone. When we are making decisions, we are alone. At the same time, we gain tremendously from social interaction. So we need that internal space in order to satisfy our internal requirements, and we need social interaction in order to thrive in every possible way. So that is the this vertical axis over here. So that's kind of a very quick overview of what I see as kind of, it's a very simple way of understanding various things of human conditions. So internal parts and external parts, and then our evolutionary heritage and our modern world. And this diagram is all about kind of interactions between all of these. So that's a kind of a quick overview. Now I'll take a few questions. Let me get a fresh diagram here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Moira, go ahead. So it's going to be Moira followed by Shelley. You need to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I really love your diagram there. It's the first time that information's been condensed into such a nice high level view for me. When I was looking at it, I guess I was thinking up in the intuitive and the conscious, the unconscious and conscious, is through my reading, I've sort of found that the unconscious processes gives its answer, its QED in emotional sort of bits, and that goes across into consciousness, which is processed into language. And I felt that regardless of whether you're in an external or internal deliberation, that thinking, feeling collaboration is going on, that they knit together in terms of coming to a good comprehensive answer. And perhaps with people who have anxiety and depression, I find in my limited experience that the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, that putting over the bits of emotional assessment and translating it into an analytical language in the brain seems to be a bit blocked. And yeah, so I just love your thinking, and that's what I was just thinking.
Moira, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And that's absolutely true. See, what happens is that we have all these faculties. You know, we have our system one over here, the intuitive faculty, and we have our deliberative faculty. And this is kind of a lot of successful work is being able to go back and forth between them. Of being able to, so for example, I've done a full meetup on writing style where you keep moving from the analytical to intuitive side in a very systematic way so that you can leverage the strengths of both these systems. So absolutely, you know, both these are needed. And there is a very interesting, you know, dance taking place between them. On one hand, so another thing that I'm going to be doing on Sunday is I'm going to be looking at ideas of Carl Jung on this. So this is all about, you know, the kind of the self is somewhere over here, like the whole thing. And his ego is over here, like his concept of ego. So it's like his whole idea is that self is the whole, your conscious is limited. You have to respect your unconscious, and you have to relentlessly try to make the unconscious conscious by becoming more and more whole. So I find that this is a way of, and like, for example, using Daniel Kahneman's system, it's simply system one and system two. So these are kind of what I'm trying to do is that a lot of people have done great work on trying to figure out human beings. I want to be able to talk about all of them in one place so we can compare all the observations. We can develop a common vocabulary so we can have a deeper conversation about it. Thank you, Moira. Thanks. Next up is Shelley, followed by Joe. Shelley, go ahead.
Hey, what was the approach you said that Peterson used? I didn't catch the word you said.
Yes, it's called consilience. So the idea of consilience, consilience means that you're trying to study many different fields and you're trying to notice many patterns in the fields. So you'd be studying neuroscience, you'd be studying evolutionary biology, you'd be studying mythology, you'd be studying history, and you're trying to see patterns on each of these fields. And then you're trying to see the overlapping of these patterns. And you're trying to look for truths that remain true across all levels. So it's a very profoundly integrative kind of a way of thinking. It's called consilience is one way of looking at it.
Does that come from the word like conciliatory?
Does this have to do with
like your comprehensivism that you're
it is very much
about comprehensivism?
Right, it is very much of comprehensivism, but consilience is the commitment to, so firstly, it has the same root as conciliation. Both come from the same root. And comprehensivism focuses that you are looking at many areas. Consilience also looks at many areas, but what you're trying to do is that you're trying to find common patterns across fields, truth that run across fields, because those tend to be more stable. You know, if you have evidence at a neurochemical level, at a behavioral level, at the neuroanatomical level from fMRI, and from history that is pointing in all in the same direction, it is more likely to be true than a small experiment in one particular axis. That's what you're trying to do with Consilience. Next up is Joe, followed by Sanjay. Joe, go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't have a lot of time to think about this, but I look at this as a framework, as a way to be able to ask better questions about society in general. So that this is, and the way I'm looking at this is that you have a value of some sort, and then you have the biological and metropolitan, or I don't know if you changed it, it was urban at one point. So the idea that then you have, from there, you have the individual and the social, but these could be, I look at this before I go through the whole thing as more of a kind of a decision tree where you can kind of start to filter data through this. And it's a way of asking questions that you can map any kind of idea to. So is that like kind of the way that maybe, because I've drawn it out in a different way, but is that the proper way of looking at this, as something that allows us to do experimentation in a common way of approaching it, so that when we look at it, we look at it system 1, system 2. The only part I'm getting hung up on is that how the economy and nurturing of the family influence the individual, or if the individual is influenced by the reverse, the family and the economy. And that's where I'm kind of getting a little bit lost.
Sure. So I'll firstly, let me address the first part. Absolutely. It's a way of kind of organizing questions. It is a way of organizing ideas and try to find kind of common patterns between things. So it's mostly an organization system. Now, I am continuously trying to tweak it, both kind of visually, and I'll have kind of many different ways of presenting it visually, each of which kind of focuses on different things. But it's very much about kind of taking questions and say, okay, what is this question about? So that you can look at other people who have asked similar questions and provided similar answers and compare all of them together. So it's kind of a way of kind of syntopically dealing with large themes in human experience. Now, there is tremendously intricate back and forth relationships going on between all kinds of levels. So let me show you one thing. So for example, you're born over here in a family. At that time, your brain is not that large. Your brain keeps growing. So as your brain keeps growing, your system 1, keeps becoming bigger and bigger. Then you develop kind of ability of deliberation, which is later part, of childhood. And that allows you to interact with people outside of your family in the larger society, and you become a productive member of the society, and you then have children, and it goes on. So you can put it just, so this is an example of the kind of chronological thing, but there is a lot of the idea of kind of individual versus the social. That's a huge theme. So it plays out in many ways. So for example, Jordan Peterson talks about friends, how your friends who are going up will help you go up, and friends who are going down will help you go down. So that's about the interaction between these two things. So the social group that you have over here, that you feel close to, what does it do? How does it interact with your psychology, your kind of automatic habits, things like that. So there is huge issues over here. There is also kind of issues of how kind of family changes over time because of the economy. What happens when we become more mobile, things like that. So there are issues between these two. There are lots of issues here that Moira was referring to, for example, of saying, how do you change your feelings? So for example, CBT is come up with the idea over here, then you do action on this side, and then use that to transform emotions. So these are kind of various ways of kind of seeing what is going on, but it's a very simple, simple structure to observe kind of general patterns. Sanjay, you're next.
Hi, so I have some questions around what you're describing. So I'm assuming that this is a model that you've come up with, and it's, I don't know how detailed you have it built in within yourself, but I'm using the visual metaphor, the map that you have, try to understand it better. So I have questions around that. I mean, is that something that's fully developed, or is that something you're still working
on? Sanjay, I mean, the thing is that a few years ago, like 10 years ago, when I would come up with, I've always been coming up with ideas like this. And I always said that, okay, I need to really work everything out and write a book about it. Now I am committed to kind of publishing my ideas faster and talking about my ideas as a way of dramatically accelerating the development of the idea. So this idea is very new to me, but it actually captures many things, many of the influences I've had. So for example, it captures Carl Jung's influence, for example, of the idea of self, and this, as well as cognitive functions. It captures, Daniel Kahneman's ideas of system 1, system 2. It captures kind of Bronowski's deep observation about the individual and the society. It captures Julian Jaynes' idea of the crucial importance of writing in creation of civilization. So it's kind of it's kind of bringing together all those things. And it's a simple way I have of putting it, but I'm trying to put it, and the thing is that these things keep changing. So like every day I will have new graphs to kind of capture more and more relationships. They keep on becoming simpler in some ways. Right. And so it's work in progress, but I would appreciate any feedback on the visual things, because I think I'm a very visual person and I'm trying to capture as much as possible, as simply as possible. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think visual metaphors are one of the best ways to present to other people, to present ideas. So that's why I want to focus on it. So I have some questions around that.
Please.
So the smaller dots that you have in each region, what does that represent? And
sure.
Why do you use the color of the one that's in the future state, I guess, what you might call?
Sure. This is the idea directly out of the Chinese idea of Yin Yang.
Right.
It's basically Yin Yang with four points. And it's like the next level is born out of this one. So you have a family and it creates a child. It has a small system 1 that develops into this system 1. Once the brain is kind of fully developed, it develops a small ability of deliberation, which blossoms into a full scale level of deliberation that slowly builds up capability of transforming the world, which flowers into this. And that will allow you to create new life, new family. So something like that. Now, ideally, I would put 3 colors in each of the dots to make it complete. But I don't know exactly how to do it so that it will hit many other goals that I'm trying to achieve. So it's a simple way of showing that you flow through all these things. It's not like you can be just internal or external. It's not as if you can just use system 1 or system 2, or you can be just focused on family and not care about the economy, or vice versa. So it's saying that you need all these 4 to fully flower. And the general movement is a spiral movement. And it's not necessarily in that order. So for example, you can have intuitions about the economy. You can be deliberative about your personal relationships and personal values. So you can go, there is a back and forth relationship between all of these things. And so at some point I'll learn how to capture that in a simple form.
Okay, just a quick question. So the red, what does that represent? Central.
Okay, that's a great question. And I'm going to, the short answer is that that's my representation of chaos, of the interaction and the
I
friction between
understand.
all of these things.
Yeah.
Generally, it is represented as outside. So you have a walled city and the chaos is outside as unlimited one. I think this is a better way of capturing it, partly based on Carl Jung's ideas. And it is where the friction, just like the edges of these are where the frictions are between these two things. This is kind of the friction of it. So in a way, I see kind of growth happening outside in, as you, and becoming kind of more and more whole, if you will. So that's how I think about it. So next one up is Claire, Stefan, and Roger. Claire, go ahead.
Could you give an example of how you could use this for decision making? I thought it was really meaningful when we were talking about the 52 ideas, pulling those as kind of tools if you have to create or make a decision. So like whether, I don't know, if it's something at work or in life or
Sure.
in a
Sure. What I want to do is that to see, this is kind of a more conceptual framework, and there are many ways in which it can be used. So today, what I want to demonstrate is how you can use this to take something like 12 rules and build it into a more powerfully integrated system, which will be a good way of doing this. And so I'll try to demonstrate it fully with that. As soon as we're done with this Q&A, I'm going to talk about how I think about all 12 rules at once using this.
Got it.
Next up is Stefan, go ahead.
You already answered. It was with Sanjay about the yin yang symbol, so thank you.
Okay. Next up is Roger.
Yeah, so I just had two real quick questions just to clarify from my end. So the totality of this, what would you say is encapsulated in this model?
It is basically human existence. It's the, it's the whole. This is very much kind of Jungian way of thinking. This is a mandala, which captures the whole, everything that you need to pay attention to. So I would really remove that teal color and put black where there is nothing over there. So everything is here. And that's what I'm trying to show.
Gotcha.
The whole of human existence, everything that I can think of, I want it to be all in here. All relationships I want to be able to capture in this. Okay, so now let's take an example. I want to talk to you about the 12 rules. Okay, and I was originally planning to talk about all 12 rules, but I'm going to, do it a little bit shorter way. So I'm going to take only 8 of the rules, which are much more clearer and simpler way, and the numbers are also less. And so let's take the rules. I mean, again, kind of coming back to it, every philosophy bears the stamp of the philosopher. That's how I think about it. So I don't think you can think about Jordan Peterson, 12 rules without Jordan Peterson. And all of us are kind of familiar with Jordan Peterson. So I'm going to go ahead and try to put it together. Because now I'm trying to bring all these rules together, like as a one system. As you can imagine, it's a tough thing to do. So first thing, I want to start with Jordan Peterson. What is like the driving force with him? Which of these rules, if you wanted to say, okay, this is really like quintessential Jordan Peterson. And I think that rule is tell the truth. That's how he actually became famous, by the issue of free speech, of what focusing on truth and speaking out the truth does for you. And that very much kind of defines who he is. So what rule is that? I don't have it here. Tell the truth, which it is
8.
Rule number 8. Okay. So I'm going to put 8 over here. Okay. So 8 is all about deliberation. It's the way, it is your system too. It is your relentless focus on reality. It is relentless measuring of saying, am I actually doing this? Partly, I can put it over here, but I think it is also closer to this part, that you're not only going to speak the truth, but you're trying to speak truth to the world, not just your family, but to to everybody who's there, everybody in the city. And that's what is necessary. So it's mostly on the right-hand side. It's very much metropolitan part of the whole thing, not on the other side. So it's not here, not here. It is mostly here. It's kind of, its home is here. And there is a tremendous relationship between this, between the yellow and the blue. That's where it is. There is another rule which is very closely related to that. And that is rule 10, about be precise in your speech. That's also very much of a system too. It's all about your deliberate commitment to precision of thought, of getting things right, being self-reflective. So it's not, so rule 10 is definitely not about the world. It is definitely not about family. It is definitely not here. So it is over here. So what we have here is, to start with, is these two rules over here. And I think when I look at Jordan Peterson, again, now I'm using the archetypes of Carl Jung. I think that is his hero function. That is his go-to function. That's what he does most of the time. He's relentlessly speaking the truth, trying to be as precise as possible. So those are the two rules so I'm just going to quickly run through this and then I'll take the questions, okay? Now, the second big archetype from Carl Jung is that of father, or that of a guidance mechanism. What does Jordan Peterson use to guide his action? And there the answer is very simple. It is meaning. That is his concept. And that meaning is all about kind of the edge of things. So if he's saying, do what is meaningful. What he's doing most of the time is speaking the truth precisely. That's what he's doing most of the time. So that's his like hero function over here. And here, this is the father function, which is deeply intuitive. So the core part of it is the concept of meaning. That is what he's using to kind of guide where he should go. If I want to put another rule right next to it, what rule would be similar? I think the best rule, though it looks very different, is the one about don't bother kids when they are skating. Which one is that, Roger? Let me find out.
That one's going to be 11.
11, right?
Yeah.
So that, though it may seem like a very different one, but it is about the fact that being at the edge, pushing your limits, is the way in which you grow. That's another way of expressing the concept of meaning. Okay, so that's both these things together is saying, okay, what should you do? You should push yourself. You should remain at the edge of order and chaos. And that is your guidance mechanism. So you're here, this is your workhorse over here, and this is your guidance mechanism. Okay. This is not, I mean, this is, I think this is very much Jordan Peterson. Okay, this is his kind of his way of looking at it. What's next? Now there is a sense of, there are two rules about society. Let me see, let me get them over here. So let me actually do a little bit, let me step back. I want to make sure that, so tell the truth. So I want to talk about the first two rules very briefly. I'm just going to read out one paragraph. So tell the truth, or at least don't lie. We transform chaos into being through speech. To tell the truth is to bring the most habitable reality into being. Truth reduces terrible complexity of man to simplicity of his word. Truth makes the past truly the past and makes best use of future's possibilities. Truth makes others partners rather than enemies. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Okay. And I also want to talk about the second one in the kind of the hero series, and that is be precise in your speech. Say what you mean so that you can find out what you mean. Act out what you say so you can find out what happens. Then pay attention. Note your errors, articulate them, strive to correct them. That is how you discover the meaning of your life. Be precise in your speech. Okay, so these two, I think, are like the heart of what he's focused on. And the two guiding principles that he has is, first one is pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Meaning is what manifests when multiple levels of being arrange themselves into perfect harmony. Meaning is the ultimate balance between chaos of transformation and possibility on one hand, and the pristine order on the other, whose purpose is to bring forth from the attendant chaos even more immaculate order. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Okay, and I want to show you how it connects to this, connects to the rule 11. Kids need playgrounds dangerous enough to remain challenging. People don't seek to minimize risk. They seek to optimize it. When untrammeled and encouraged, we prefer to live on the edge. There, we can still be both confident in our experience and confronting the chaos that helps us develop. So this is like a different formulation of the concept of meaning. So it's the same concept, put in two different ways. Okay. Now I want to go to two other rules. I'm going to go to the, let me see. Okay, I'm going to go to, let me go back to the diagram. Let me take another one here. So far what we've done is that we've talked about this as being the hero functions with two, this as being the guiding functions. I want to bring in a second kind of function, which Jung calls anima. I'm going to use the term spouse as a much more kind of common, commonly understood version of it. Otherwise, it takes a long time to explain people what anima is. Basically, it is something that completes you, something that you need. And I think in Jordan Peterson's case, I mean, and all of this, what I'm saying is basically based on Jung's ideas of functions and their mirrors, things like that, that comes from his psychological functions. So for him, I think the two big principles there, come from kind of human, they're based on human biology and kind of family relations. And those are two very interesting ones. So let me bring them up. So the first one is, make friends with people who want the best for you. If you surround yourself with people who support your upward aim, they will not tolerate your cynicism and destructiveness. They will instead encourage you when you do good for yourself and others, and punish you carefully when you do not. This will bolster your resolve to do what you should do in most appropriate and careful manner. People who are not aiming up will do the opposite. Make friends with people who want the best for you. So this is kind of, I mean, the way I see it is that this is kind of the modern version of the family, of people who are like you, whom you share values with, that provide a support mechanism to allow you to enable you to grow. The second rule I want to put in this category is, and this is very interesting, treat yourself like someone you're responsible for. So to treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping, is to consider what would be truly good for you. It is not what you want or what would make you happy. Every time you give a child something sweet, you make the child happy. But you must help a child become virtuous, responsible, awake being, capable of full reciprocity, able to take care of himself and others, and to thrive while doing so. Why would you think it acceptable to do anything less yourself? So the way I see that is that this is basically kind of taking a notion that is already deeply built in us as part of us as family. Like, how would you treat a person you love? And then turning it back on ourselves. So it's taking a lesson from here and applying to this. So I want to start with this. I would rather first focus on the first two, and then I'll go to this one. So I just want to open it up for questions and see if, so we'll go with Moira followed by Joe. Moira, go ahead.
Hello, I'm really loving this talk, and I'm excited that you're going to write a book around it. On the initial conception, as you know, I'm not a psychologist, come from other background. In my experience, that not all families are nurturing, and that you have dangerous, competitive, and dominant members. You know, that's all given by sort of your genetic inheritance. Mm-hmm. And that in history, if you look at sort of places like the Vikings or the Romans or even the Aboriginals here in Australia, they would put children out to die in the weather if they weren't fit. And so you have a different environment now, which is much more benign. And I guess I stalled on the nurturing in family, because I do feel that in the past, it was a much more dangerous existence within families, within tribes, and that your unconscious is like the speedy response. This person is getting angry and might throttle me, versus the deliberate, which is, do I have time to build a relationship with this person that they understand that I'm not going to try and subvert them in the pecking order of either the family or the society, the tribe. So I feel like this sense of it going around in time, I believe through reading and personal experience, that the unconscious conscious thing developed at the same time to help you survive in families, in tribes. And actually it's just, you know, growing in usefulness as we grew bigger societies in developing culture.
No, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that there is a proto version of system 2 that you have, you know, very early. But what the point I have in kind of making this distinction between biological and civilization, biological or urban, is that when you start dealing with people that you do not know, the level of deliberation in order to do that successfully, when you're dealing with a family, right, our brains are very large and we are particularly suited to see what is going on with people. Our ability to read people's faces and body language is fantastic, especially if you know them very well. So our system 1 does a fantastic job of dealing with people that you know. But when it comes to people in general whom you're not even seeing, who have impact on you, the level of deliberation required becomes larger. And second thing is that I think writing is a very large part, because what writing does is that it develops self-reflective thought. It allows you to really scale that up. And so it's kind of combination of the necessity of dealing with 5,000 plus people, now 8 billion people, and ability of using writing. By writing, I also include these diagrams, by the way, because they also serve the same function of taking your thought, putting it externally and looking at it so that you can keep correcting it. That's the mechanism, kind of externalizing of thought that I'm talking about. So absolutely, so you have a core of it, but it kind of expands. I'm going to take people first who have not asked questions, and then, so it's going to be Keaton, Mike, and Joe. Katin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that as you go through these concrete examples, like say the rules, and then I look at it in the diagram, and I see what you're doing. It's kind of going from concrete to abstract. So that's what I'm getting from it. And it's very helpful to kind of go back into the abstract after hearing all of these. So that's all I have to say. But
Thank you. Thank you, Katin. Next up is Mike, followed by Marco, followed by Joe. Mike, go ahead. Mike, you're on mute. Can't hear you. Okay, next up is Marco.
I got unmuted, if I can have
Oh,
it.
nice. And your mic, your sound is good. Go ahead.
Well, the problem with my sound is I'm on Unix and low bandwidth, and now
What's your question?
I'm not running anything else. I think I understand this a little better now than that you drew the 12 rules on the map. I still am trying to understand how to make decisions based on that, which several people have asked you. Now, if the fact that you have a four variables, a four-dimensional system, limits you. But Jung and Myers-Briggs all had four-dimensional systems, and comparing it to the Yin Yang system, that's a two-dimensional system. You can make a lot of decisions based on the two-dimensional system. Now, if we're going to, a four-dimensional system is more understandable and simple, although you still have the problem as compared to what Bucky was talking about with the Dymaxion chart. But that gets, I do understand, is more, you lose the simplicity. So if you wanted a four-dimensional system, you probably, there's a property that Jung had in his four-dimensional system, and which Yin Yang has in its two-dimensional system, is orthogonality. And what does that mean? It means that with thinking and sensitivity are independent of each other. Good and evil are independent. To make that fit, I think that two orthogonal systems would be the blue, the top blue could be system 1, and the bottom blue could be system 2, and the left-hand coordinate could be individual, and the right-hand coordinate could be groupthink, and family is somewhere on the scale in between the two. And then you have an orthogonal system that could be used for decisions in the same way Myers-Briggs is and Carl Jung is.
Right. I mean, the thing is that if you want to just map it into Myers-Briggs or Carl Jung, the purple is intuition. The thinking is, the yellow. Then you've got kind of mostly sensory stuff. I would put in the blue, and then I would put the feeling, which is actually valuing in his terms as green. So it's, I'm definitely aware. I'm very much aware, and I'm going to do a full mapping of Carl Jung this Sunday at 2:30. Next up is
orthogonal. The issue, though, of even after you do that, will it be orthogonal?
There are many ways.
That's important to make.
Yeah, no, that's a good. That's a good observation. I mean, I think with the 4 dimensions, it's like you can look at like biological versus this, and you can do a yin yang just with that, or you can do internal versus external. So there are many different ways of doing these divisions. And I will keep on developing the visuals in order to capture as much of the relationships as possible. Next one up is Marco. But Mike, I really appreciate all the feedback, and I'm kind of trying to take it all in. There is, it's a question of kind of keeping things simple, and very powerful, trying to capture as many things as possible. So I'm relentlessly going and trying to take in different systems, like Jordan Peterson today, Carl Jung on Sunday. I did like the top ideas that we have studied last Sunday. I'm going to go and do the Syntopicon, which is like all the ideas of everybody. I'm doing that on my own. It's too difficult to kind of present that, but I'm doing all of that, and I'm playing around with all of that to see which ways of organizing things are most effective. And I'm talking to everybody about it so I can get feedback from others, and I'll keep on tweaking it to make it better, hopefully. Next up is Marco. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, so for rule number 2, would it work the same way as like CBT, where you're starting in the deliberating and then working to the left down to
okay, just a second. Rule number 2 is what?
Treat yourself like you are someone you're responsible for.
Yes. Yes. So the way I see that is that what it is doing is that it is taking a very deeply held idea in the concept of family, that you know how to treat people who you really care about, and you know all the issues involved. Unfortunately, when people think of themselves, they don't think of it themselves that. So it is taking a principle from here and saying that you should be doing the same thing over here. So that is how, you know, the kind of the structure of the rule is that you already know how to operate with other people here. And this is a very deep idea. This is an idea that Jordan Peterson uses again and again. It's a way of kind of personifying things, thinking of different things as personalities. Like, for example, as I'm doing, of saying hero function and father function or spouse function or child function. Because what it does is that it's immediately, so it's like another way of putting the same thing is that the way you should treat yourself as you would treat your child in some way. So you're just like, you care about them very deeply. You know that they are going to make mistakes. You are going to encourage them. You're going to, basically just the way in which you would raise a child, you're trying to raise yourself. And that's much more easier to grasp of what you need to do, because the idea of this human relations is very deeply held. And you can just transfer everything that you know about it from this side into this side. So that's what is going on with rule 2. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So just a really quick question. So each rule, there could be a set of data points underneath it. So let's just take the rule, tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And you had that, and then you contrast that with another behavioral economist, Dan Ariely, who studies why we lie, mm-hmm. right? So you would kind of see the interactions as to between, you know, why you should tell the truth and the conditions under which we lie, in between the systems and the let me see, between the systems themselves and the individual circumstances. So would that be a way, like, you would add data points to each rule and then see how they function within each one of these systems? Is that a good way of looking at this now? Is these rules become data points, and then the interactions in between them would be, you know, the conditions by which you tell the truth and the conditions by which you lie?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm not sure I understand the question too well, but let me just talk about, you know, how I think about, like, how, like, when I understand a rule and I'm trying to, for example, firstly, I want to make an observation about kind of behavioral economics things that you're talking about. That's basically showing something here being influenced by this over here. How right. System, so this interaction between this, because most people think that economics is mostly coming from here, but there is a real interaction going on here in things like advertising, again and again, many different fields. So that's what the whole, you know, field of behavioral economics is trying to do. Now,
right. So if eight
go ahead.
isn't if 8 isn't deliberating, right?
Mhm.
So then you have 8 there. You would have, basically behavioral economics and the intuitive unconscious, and the link between the economy. Is that kind of like you add data points to each one of them, and you can see how they interact with one
I mean,
another?
what I'm trying to do is that I'm always trying to kind of get to reality all the time, because all these principles, etc., are ways of our patterns that are all principles are trying
Right.
to capture patterns in reality. And you have to kind of relentlessly keep going back to the actual observations and try to get things from them. The second thing I want to say here is that all these rules and all the human things are incredibly complex. And typically, all these 4 things are involved in everything that we do to some extent. I mean, when I say that something like speak the truth is based over here, it has tremendous impact on your system 1 over a period of time. It has tremendous impact how you deal with people. It has tremendous impact of how you develop kind of close relationships with people. So there is a tremendous back and forth going on. Second thing is that there is the spiral pattern, is that as you become better and better at something, it allows you to actually ramp up more on something. So by the time you've gone and hit all the 4 things and come back, you're able to do more at that level. So like, for example, your system 1, if you fully engage system 2, if you do things in transforming the world, if you develop personal relation, when you come back to your system 1, your system 1 will be at a better place. So there is a, kind of virtuous cycles going on over here. All right, so this is a kind of a quick summary of this. So what I want to do is I want to now do kind of breakout rooms for some time, so you guys can discuss it amongst yourself, and then we can come back and I'll take more questions based on whatever discussions, whatever you guys found interesting. All right, so I'm going to start the breakout rooms now.